Welcome to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to other people about their stories with VEDS or vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. This is your host, Katie, and before we get into the show, I want to remind you that the views, information, and opinions in this podcast are those of the individuals involved, and the information presented does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Welcome back to another episode of Staying Connected. Today, a previous guest, Emily Ranta, is joining us to share how she's been doing and talk about her experience with the bowel perforation since her last interview on Staying Connected in 2018. Listen in at the end of the show for some info about community events coming up, including Reds for VEDS Day, which is just around the corner. But before we jump in today, I want to give a shout out to Morgan Joswiak, a member of our community previously on the show, for completing the Boston Marathon this week. Way to go, Morgan. Morgan raised more than $14,000 for the VEDS Movement by running in the marathon. Before we go over to the interview, if you want to support the show, consider joining my Patreon. For a few dollars a month, you can make sure this show continues to reach people around the world with real-life stories about VEDS. You can join the Patreon at patreon.com/translucent1, and you can also support the show by sharing this podcast with people you know to help us raise awareness of VEDS around the world. Thank you so much for your support, and a huge thanks to my current patrons who have already been supporting the show. My top tier patrons are listed in the episode show notes. Hey, Emily, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited to have you back on to talk about, what you've been through since the last time that we interviewed together in 2018. For those who haven't heard your interview before, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Emily Ranta. I was diagnosed with VEDS back in 2007 by Dr. Peter Byers at the UW, and that was when I was 14, several months after my mother died from complications of the disorder.
Thank you for that introduction. And anybody who wants to go listen to your story, was like December of 2018. So it's way back there in the interviews, but I'll put a link to it in the description of this or in the episode show notes for this episode.
I was like episode 8 or 10.
Yeah, it was early on. And I appreciate you doing that with me back then too.
No problem.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, what's happened since our last interview. Prior to that, like you talked about your mom's diagnosis and your diagnosis and her death and everything that you went through from that. What's happened since 2018?
So from 2018 on up to now, we've seen how the disorder progresses. Because this disorder is one that does progress as we get older. It gets worse as we get older. Some people progress more slowly, while others progress more gradually. It seems with me, I go in spurts to where it gets worse slowly, then it'll be like a worse one, and then more slowly again. So from 2018 to 2020, I was okay. My daily pains were getting a bit more. So I was having my physicians work on getting pain meds more regulated. But then in 2020, my colon ruptured. So on August 9th, we were emptying out our storage unit. We were moving things in from the storage unit to the house. We had several friends with us who were helping. I wasn't touching any of the boxes. I was just telling people where to put things. Mm-hmm. Like these boxes go in the front room for the kitchen. Those boxes go in the bedroom. Mattress goes in the bedroom, that kind of stuff. I wasn't touching any of the boxes. But my colon decided to rupture while we were doing that. Initially, I felt the pain down in my groin on the right-hand side, and it initially just felt like an ovarian cyst rupture, because I've had a few of those. And usually with those, while they are quite painful, there's not really much an ER can do with them. And that's initially what I thought it was. So I took a few more of my pain meds for the max of my daily allotment. And then I went to my night shift because at the time I was working as a caregiver. And Saturday I had a couple hours in the morning and a couple hours in the evening for the client I worked for. But when I worked for her that evening, my pain just started getting steadily worse and worse to the point where I actually puked in her bathroom due to the pain. And she let me off early, which was right before my puking episode. And as soon as I got to the car, I had another one. And the pain was so intense at that point that I knew I couldn't drive. So I had to call my husband, who was at the storage unit down in Mukilteo, which is from where I was currently at, was about a half-hour drive. And I had asked him to come get me and take me to the hospital, which was really close. It was only a few blocks away at that point. He actually called my cousin and my uncle came and picked me up, and they drove me in my car to the ER. And I could barely move at that point. We had to stop the car again so I could puke again, and then we got to the ER. So I had 3 puking episodes due to the pain, and then we got to the ER where it was just blinding pain. I barely remember anything. I don't remember the checking in. I remember a little bit within the ER, mostly that they did have me hooked up to IV. I vaguely remember that they took me to a CT scan to see what was going on in my stomach, and that they were giving me Dilaudid about every 15 minutes, and it wasn't even touching my pain.
Wow.
I remember waking up a little bit after the CT scan, and my husband was with me in the room because this was during the COVID shutdown, so only one person could be in the room with me.
Mm-hmm.
So when Robert was done getting stuff out of the storage unit and had taken our friends home, the friends that helped us move things into the house, he came and sat by me at the hospital. And they told him that my colon had decided to rupture and they needed to take me back for an emergency surgery. And I was extremely septic by the time they took me back to the OR. Robert told me that it took 6.7 liters of saline to clean out my stomach and my colon. And they said it still wasn't enough to clean out all the refuse from my stomach. I ended up in the hospital for 27 days. Part of that was due to issues with healing. I actually ended up having several pockets of fluid develop, one by my right lung, and then the other actually right behind my colostomy, which is what they gave me in the sigmoid colon because that's where the tear was. And those pocket of fluids were actually, the right one was actually bulging into my lung, and then the other one was pushing on the ostomy. So they were quite painful. And the one in my lung was monitored, and that one did end up going down on its own, but the one by the ostomy needed to be drained. So exactly a week after the initial surgery, I was to be given a tube with a drain. But at that time, I was slightly walking. I had been walking since about the previous Friday. And I had found out very painfully that I couldn't roll onto my sides because the muscles in my stomach and in my back did not like me moving at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I could lay only on my back. I could not move sideways or the other. Otherwise, my muscles would start screaming at me. And I told interventional radiology to please not put me on my side for them putting in the drain. And they didn't listen to me. They told me they had to and had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up being very bad. I ended up getting a hematoma in my back due to the pressure of my muscles straining for them putting me on my side. And that hematoma ended up bleeding very badly in my back. I was actually bedridden for a whole week after that, and in the ICU. and I needed 3 blood transfusions due to that to calm my system down. So even after the initial surgery tried to kill me at first, they tried to kill me afterwards with that mistake because they didn't listen. Because I tried telling them about the VEDS and about how my tissues just really don't want to work very well.
Mm-hmm.
And how if my muscles are screaming like that, we really don't want to push them because then they could tear. But they didn't listen.
Yeah. So what a challenge that was. So I want to so let me just make sure I'm understanding where. So this is like August 2020 when your colon ruptured, and then you got an ostomy.
Yes.
And then you developed these fluid pockets that needed to be drained
within a week.
Yeah. Okay. And these are like infection fluid, or is this like blood?
It wasn't an infection yet.
Okay.
I did end up getting an infection because of one of the fluids, because of the pocket behind the ostomy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Because they did not, interventional radiology did not do what they were supposed to do with it. So when you have a drain given to you, whether in the hospital or not, you're supposed to flush the drain twice a day, at least once in the morning and once at night. And I was not given that little tubing to flush the drain. They never gave it to me. So that was a problem, because sometimes other things can come out and actually clog the tubing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you're supposed to flush it so that it doesn't get clogged. And you're supposed to monitor how much fluid is in. Sometimes it's a little ball. Sometimes it's actually a squeezed ball that literally sucks fluid out. That was the second drain I had. This one was more just a drain that they were letting gravity take care of.
So overall, you ended up like at the, you're in the ICU for 27 days. You end up having, you said two different drains.
The second drain was with the second surgery.
Okay. So tell me about the second surgery.
So the second surgery was the colostomy takedown, the hernia repair, because I had a hernia at that time, due to most likely bending too much, because when you have an ostomy without any protection for the muscles, sometimes a hernia can arise, which is what happened with me. And then that was the ileostomy creation. And why I had that was because we were trying to put my colon back together. I had seen two specialists, one a colorectal surgeon specialist and the other a hernia repair specialist. And my colorectal specialist decided that she would allow me to try putting the colon back together, with the knowledge that even with the VEDS, even if it does get back together, I will always still be at risk for another rupture. Mm-hmm. That's just the nature of the VEDS. And she'd put me back together this one time, but she wouldn't do it again if I ruptured a second time.
So then you would end up with like a permanent colostomy.
Yes.
Okay.
And a colostomy is the one that's down on the lower parts of the colon. The second one I got was an ileostomy, which is slightly different, actually on the right side of the body, whereas the colostomy was on the left side of the body.
So how did you end up with this ileostomy?
The ileostomy, they wanted the colostomy to heal, that takedown to heal before actually allowing refuse to go through the entire colon completely. So she created a temporary ileostomy higher up in the colon and higher up on the right side of the body so that the rectum and the lower colon could heal. And I had that until from October was when I got the ileostomy, until May. Okay. This last year was when the ileostomy was taken down.
Okay.
So I was in the hospital about 2.5 weeks, I think, almost 3 weeks, with the colostomy breakdown surgery, because that was a 12-hour surgery. It was very hard. very hard on my body and very hard on the tissues, because they also had to put mesh in. And we had a different issue after that surgery, because with the creation of the colostomy and the takedown of the colostomy, they had to open up my stomach, and they had to go through the stomach muscles a second time. And the muscles and the tissue didn't like that. So what actually happened was that after my stomach was stapled back up, the skin actually started stretching out and going in. And it was really bad. That's actually why I stayed in as long as I did, because they wanted that to actually start healing before they let me go home. Because I pretty much had almost a hole in my stomach.
Yeah.
That was about the length of my middle finger and about that deep. And it was really bad. It went all the way down to the mesh. I think without the mesh, it would have gone all the way down to my colon and to my muscles, and actually within the stomach.
Yeah. So so this is like a very long period of time of either, you have your colon rupture, you get a colostomy, you get a takedown, but you get an ileostomy. And then later you have this takedown of the ileostomy, and you have a hernia repair during this time. So this like spans like a couple years almost.
3 years.
Yeah. So
from August of 2020 to May of 22.
Okay. So how did you like emotionally cope with all this? Like, this is your first colon rupture, right?
Yeah. And this was my worst surgery that I've ever had done. I mean, I have had surgery within my stomach. I've had a gallbladder takedown because I had gallstones, and I was 17 when that happened. I've had teeth removed for my dental work, and I've had a few other minor surgeries. The ACL wasn't minor, but I did have my screw taken out from my ACL replacement. And I still have my ACL in there because I tore that when I was 12. But this was definitely the worst, and it was hard. It was very bad. I don't know. I actually don't know how well I handled it. I don't think I handled it well, because dealing with an ostomy really is disgusting. You have to handle your own refuse, your own feces, and sometimes you miss the bathroom. You do not make it to the toilet, or even worse, your bag breaks while you're asleep and you wake up covered in feces, and it is so disgusting. So disgusting. I hated it with every fiber of my being. Did I hate it? And especially with how sensitive my skin is, my skin hated the bags terribly. I would always get a rash underneath the bags, underneath the adhesive with the bags, and it hurt so much trying to take those bags off. Sometimes I'd have to take them off in the shower because it was just so hard to get them off. I did end up finding something to help me take them off, but I didn't find that until I think sometime in January or February of 22 that I finally find an adhesive remover that actually worked. And it was just, it was literally just what they use within the felt removers. But instead of it being the felt, it was actually the liquid that they use with the felt, or with the little squares. Mm-hmm. And it was literally just whatever solution they soak that in. That thankfully was a savior and helped so much getting the ostomies off. But I literally felt a difference between the skin under the ostomy and the skin not under the ostomy on my stomach. There was a marked difference between the two. And thankfully, I haven't had as much issue now. It's like I've had the ileostomy's been gone since May, thankfully, and I haven't had too much issues down there so far.
And that was May 2022, right?
Yeah, I spent a good several months recovering at home, even after that one. And that one, I did have some issues after that surgery, but neither of them were as bad as the first or second.
Yeah. What kind of coping mechanisms did you adopt during this time?
I try not to think about it for the most part, unless I had to deal with the bathroom or like with the wake up. My husband helped me so much with it. He was so patient. He helped me with every cleanup, especially when it was waking up in the bed, because the bedding would have to be changed after that and the blankets. It was so nasty. But he was pretty much my rock at that point. He never got frustrated with it. He was with me for every appointment that he could be with me at. Every time he could visit me at the hospital after work, he would, because sometimes due to the restrictions, he couldn't, especially after the first surgery. He couldn't visit me when I was out of the ICU, because there were times I was out of the ICU, but I had so many more hospital visits within these last 3 years than I have in the last 10. And so many more doctor's appointments. I had to jump through so many hoops between the first and second surgeries and the second and thirds, just to make sure that I could even do them or not. Even our specialist, Dr. Shireen Shalhoub, even she didn't know if I could actually go through the reconnection.
Mm-hmm.
I figured I could, because I knew there was a young boy in Texas. I think his name's Austin. He has a challenge himself, like Annabelle's challenge in the UK for VEDS.
Right.
He has one for him in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
He had an ostomy as a child under the age of 10, and he was able to get it put back together.
Yeah, and there definitely are some people with VEDS who have gone through the reversal, although I know it is more risky than in people who don't have VEDS. So it's really great that like worked for you.
Right. And the colorectal specialist I had, she knew of the disorder, but she also worked and actually spoke to Dr. Shireen, Dr. Byers, and my primary care, Dr. Vorvik. She worked in tangent with them through the whole process, and she spoke to them herself. It wasn't a fairy or an owl between me and the physicians. She did that herself, which made that a lot easier.
Yeah, what a relief to have an advocate there helping you.
Yeah. And plus, she made sure that we had my surgeries at Montlake, and she always made sure that the days of my surgeries were days that Dr. Shalhoub could be there in case something went wrong, like it nearly did with the second surgery, because that was a 12-hour surgery. And Dr. Chen told me that by the time she was creating my ILI after the mesh insertion, she said my tissues were just falling apart in her hands doing the ILI creation. And that was about the 12-hour mark. So that was my longest surgery and the worst.
So how is this kind of like, let me go back to what you said at the beginning of this interview, which was that you were describing how this condition feels like it gets worse as you age. Is this how you came to this conclusion? Or I guess really what I'm asking is, like, how has all of this changed your understanding of your condition of VEDS?
It's changed my understanding to where, while I could tell initially that, at least with my body, that I was getting worse due to the length of time my bruises would heal, the severity of the bruises and the pain that I would have, and that, but this made it even much worse. Especially it made me worse than my mom, because how I used to measure myself was in terms of my mother, because I'm now 29 and I'm now at the age where I was seeing where my mom was at my same age, because she was 22 when she had me, almost 23 back in the 90s. And while she didn't get diagnosed, I saw what she went through on a daily basis. And that's actually why I want to be in more touch with my physicians and monitor myself, because she didn't do that at all. she mostly ignored her issues so she could work, which we shouldn't do that. We need to be monitored in case something does happen, especially like with the issues I'm having now. My inflammation levels are through the roof and have been continuously. I've been continuously anemic for the last few years, and those levels haven't gone down into normal ranges. They just haven't. I've actually recently been diagnosed with both POTS and ADHD and potentially autism as well. And there's actually been studies shown that ADHD and autism and actually POTS have a lot of correlation between not just themselves, but with EDS in general. Not necessarily with the VEDS, at least not with the POTS.
But like the broader, spectrum of types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yes, and I actually just found out from my specialist on ADHD, there is a marked difference or correlation between ADHD and EDS through the mast cells. And that's actually a similar study I found a few years ago on autism and EDS, the same correlation between the two. And there's actually quite a few symptoms that are very similar between ADHD and autism, to the point where some people get diagnosed with both. I'm actually just about to start my new medication for the ADHD, and I am working towards getting at least tested for autism as well.
Yeah. So let's pause there. Like, you're going through all of this kind of evaluation for ADHD and autism. You've developed POTS and anemia, it seems like, since your bowel perforation or since your colon rupture.
Oh, yes. The POTS, we believe I had it to begin with because it is something like EDS you were born with. But I didn't have much issues besides heat intolerance and a few others. But the first surgery really kicked it into overdrive. I now get hot flashes if the temperature changes too much. It is even worse in the hospital because the temperature is always fluctuating in the hospital, like on a roller coaster. And where I used to not sweat at all, if the temperature changes, I sweat constantly. Whether I am too cold or too warm, I will sweat if the temperature is changing. So I have to keep the temperature at my house at a single level. And even with that, I'm still getting hot flashes and constant tachycardia. I will just be sitting either reading or watching a show or a non-stimulating game, and my heart rate will be continually above 110, always tachycardic. That's why I wear the watch on me at all times. So it alerts me to that so I can take my medication to help bring the heart rate back down. Because it's not good to have the heart rate too high. At least not if you're not doing anything.
Right. Yeah. That's not really good for your heart.
Nope.
So after like all of these experiences and going through what you went through with the two different types of ostomies and the hernia, like, what kind of advice do you have for somebody listening who might be going through, they might be in that same period right after that ostomy where they're first dealing with all of that? What kind of advice do you have for somebody going through this?
If it's their first time with an ostomy, don't give up hope yet, because you might be able to convince the physicians to put it back together. You might not be stuck with it. Now, in some people, they can handle it. They can handle cleaning it and keeping themselves clean along with it. Also, don't just keep it to yourself. Let others help you, because it is a hard thing to clean, to keep looking down and cleaning your stomach. And if you're trying to look down and measure the bag, no, for one, it's going to hurt your neck trying to do that. And two, you will not get a good measurement. And if you don't get a good measurement on the ostomy with the bag, you are more likely to have a broken bag than not, even if it's just during the day. I learned that the hard way. If someone is helping you, helping you with the bag, helping you measure and cut out the bag, you'll have a better seal that will stay for several days at a time, and where you'll have less of an issue with an unexpected rupture, especially at night. And I know it'll be very difficult to ask for help. It was for me, but my husband was literally my rock for me. And he would not let me think bad about myself when I'd have to ask him to help me clean, either clean the bathroom when I had a mess or clean me when I had a mess, or even the bed. Yeah. And always keep spare bags on you. Always. I had made up a gray bag that I had at least one or two of every supply I needed in case I had an issue or a rupture away from the house. And those bags were always pre-cut, because sometimes I wouldn't have rubber with me. And a few times I did have a broken bag outside of the house, and I didn't have him with me. And those bags were the lifesavers, because otherwise it's going to be a very smelly car.
Yeah.
And you're not going to want to clean that either.
Well, that is all like such really, really good advice for somebody going through that. And I really think that covers some like practical, keeping extra bags, but also some really like emotional things, like asking for help is hard. And you talked about, body image, or, feeling bad about yourself, and like having somebody there to help you with that. And I think, I don't know, I just really loved all of that advice. And I hope that somebody listening who's going through this really hears that.
Yeah. And even though I don't have the bags anymore, I still have the scars. And most of the feeling around those scars, I don't have feeling around most of those scars. But sometimes I do, but I still don't want to look at them. I don't want to wear like form-fitting clothes that'll show the outline of the scars, or even a bikini. I hated bikinis to begin with, but now with my scars, it's even worse. And I did have to show off my scar to my doctor the other day, and she made a slight joke that my belly button's now cut in two, because it is. Because the middle scar, the stomach scar, literally cleaved my belly button in two pieces. And with our scars, they are raised and very dark. Even if they stretch out, they're still raised and they're still very dark over the very pale skin. And one thing I noticed after the stress of the first surgery, I lost a lot of volume, and I actually lost a lot of hair. Just in general, I don't have a lot of hair much anymore, so there's not much I can do with it. It is extremely even thinner than it was. And I've had issues with that too. But there's a lot of ostomy sites on Facebook. There's some ostomy with Ehlers-Danlos sites. And just in general, there's a lot of sites that will offer support and offer advice. And sometimes those of us who don't have the ostomies anymore, we still have supplies, because it's not like we can give them back. I mean, I'm stuck with the supplies I still have. So at the moment, we're just thinking of keeping them just in case, because I'm still at risk for another rupture. Mm-hmm. And right now I'm barely 30. And at the moment, my goal is just to at least be 1 year older than my mom when she passed. And that's only 8 years from now.
Well, I have confidence that you will beat that number. I mean, you mentioned earlier, like staying on top of your condition and getting help for the things that you need help with, and, seeing your doctors, and I'm, probably getting scans.
Lots of them.
And lifestyle changes. And, your mom unfortunately didn't know that she had VEDS when she died.
No, we were misdiagnosed at that time.
Yeah.
And we didn't really understand it, because it was such a rare disorder, even the ones we were misdiagnosed with. Mm-hmm. She was misdiagnosed with hypermobility and me with classic.
Yeah. Yeah. And so anybody who's listening wants to go back and listen to that story. The link to that initial interview is in the episode show notes. But truly, Emily, I really appreciate you coming on and opening up about your experience with that colostomy and the ileostomy and everything you went through there. And I really hope that it helps somebody else listening to this who's going through the same thing.
Yeah. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come back, Katie.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it is so great to see you again. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Thank you so much, Emily, for coming back on the show and sharing your experience with your bowel perforation and life with VEDS over the last few years. And thank you, everyone, for listening in today. There is a big event coming up for our community on May 19th, Reds for VEDS Day. Reds for VEDS Day is an international event where we all wear red to raise awareness of VEDS around the world. It was started by Annabelle's Challenge over in the UK, and it is so awesome to see everyone around the world participate by using the hashtag #RedsForVEDS. Be sure to wear red on May 19th and share your picture on social media. And on May 6th, Bella Marin, known as the Investigator on social media, and myself will be on a YouTube live stream for a talk about our lives with VEDS. We'll get into the nitty-gritty about what it is like living with VEDS, and we'll answer questions too. There are additional opportunities to connect with others and learn more about VEDS coming up soon. The Marfan Foundation hosts in-person Walks for Victory around the United States. These are fundraisers, but also an opportunity to connect with others in the community. In April, May, and June, join community members at these events in Aptos, California, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Washington, D.C., Raleigh, North Carolina, Seattle, Washington, New York City, New York, Boston, New England, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. The foundation is also hosting a symposium on Marfan, Loeys Dietz, and VEDS on April 29th in Colorado, and coming up right around the corner is the foundation's conference held this year in Chicago, July 13th to 16th. The Ehlers-Danlos Society will be hosting a VEDS Camp in partnership with the VEDS Movement the weekend prior to the Marfan Foundation Conference at Camp Joy in Ohio. Links to more information about these events can be found in the episode show notes. On our next episode of Staying Connected on May 6th, we will talk to Jared Griffin, founder and CEO of Annabelle's Challenge in the UK, which he founded after his daughter's diagnosis of VEDS. Don't forget to subscribe to Staying Connected on your podcast player so you don't miss this or any other future episodes. And if you like this show, I hope you will consider sharing it with your friends on social media to help us raise awareness of VEDS together. You can also support the production of this podcast by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/translucent1. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon.